Hey there, and welcome to my next video. Uh, Today we're going to be working on this still life with pears. It was a demonstration that I did for my Tuesday class at Mount's Botanical Garden, and it was right before the hurricane. Well, thankfully the hurricane passed north of us, um, and we didn't have too much here, but the garden was closed on Thursday, so there was no Thursday class. I did hear from some of my students after posting an email of the finished demo that they would like to see the process again and a little bit more um, fleshed out. So that's what this video is going to be. I'll be working on it in stages, and I'm going to be talking about painting with intention. These are the two things that I want to stress before we get started. That watercolor, once you learn the brush strokes and dealing with the water to paint ratio and how to do a good wash, once you have those tools in your toolkit, then it really becomes a mental exercise in how you're going to approach your painting. So this video is, I'm going to talk a lot about my mindset and how I handle putting a painting together. So when I come back, we'll have a sketch up, and we'll still have our reference picture here, and we'll be going from there, and I'll have it full screen on the painting as we start, and I'll take breaks between the layers and come back and talk to you. So that's what we're going to do. So get ready. This will probably be done as a one-part video, but there'll be breaks in the layers so that I can dry them up. It's a fun painting. It's not terribly hard. The shapes, pears are, fairly forgiving. Based on the reference picture, if you want to paint along, then sketch out your pears, and we'll be back in a little while. Okay, we are back. I've done the sketch of the pears. What I want to say about sketching for a watercolor painting is keep your pencil lines light. I know right now you can't see them too well, which is why I have the painting up side by side with it. What do we want to do? Keep your pencil lines light. Make a roadmap for yourself, but not so much that you're doing a full drawing. Keep a loose hand and just get the information you want. If you can do that, it translates better into your painting. It keeps your hand fresh if you don't have too much of a paint by number setup going on. I did mark out and map my highlights. The last time I painted this, I added white acrylic for the highlights in the end. I will try to paint around them this time, but honestly, if it's going to impede you painting intentionally and getting your washes down comfortably, then add the white at the end. It's fine. What do I want you to think about before you start this? If we look at the reference photo here, which you can see I didn't follow entirely. I lightened the background in the front. That helped give me a staging, a background, a middle to put the plate of pears on, and a foreground. I think it worked better. And I'll probably do the exact same thing this time. But what I want to talk to you about is being intentional when you paint. And what do I mean by that? As you start to develop your skills, one of the traps that I fell into, and I'm sure a lot of other people do, is that you want to knock out your painting all in one sitting. I do that when I sketch. When I'm outdoors, I'll do my pencil work, my ink, and then my watercolor, or reverse it and do the watercolor and then the ink. But I'll do that all within the hour and a half, 2 hours that I'm sitting there. And I usually don't get up and walk around. When I'm in the studio, it's a different thing with watercolor. I have been asking my students for a while to try to see the finished product, to try and see their finished painting before they start. And that may have been too much of a challenge for a lot of folks. So what I want you to do is think of it more like you're climbing a mountain. You know, you're at the base, you're on the ground, you're looking at where you're going to put your hands for that first step. That's your first goal, is get your feet off the ground. Put yourself in a position where you can find your next handholds. When you get there, take a minute, look around. What do you want to do? Remembering your ultimate goal is to get to the top. What moves can you make that will get you to the top? And what is your goal for the next level? It's really that simple. Watercolor is the same way. You put your first base wash down. In this case, the pears are yellow and red. The yellow, green, and red, and the red is darker than that yellow-green color. So really, we can put that yellow-green down in a first wash over the entire group of 4 pears. See them as one animal or one object for now, and work that way. You could, in the first layer, start to put in red, but I'm going to say, let's make our goal, let's make our objective that we mix up a nice yellow-green and we get it down and cover all of the pears. And we'll do that by putting it down, and we'll have sap green, we'll have orange, and we'll have yellow on our palette. And we'll put those down, and we're not trying to paint in the lines of the pears. At this point, think of them as one pear. And just get that color down there, looking at your reference and putting some color down. Before we do that, let's talk about what colors are going to be on our palette. All right, so we've got cadmium yellow primrose, sap green, pyrrole orange transparent, medium pyrrole red, Payne's gray, and ultramarine blue. Those last two become important in the background, as well as when you are painting in the shadows on the pears. I'm going to leave purple off my palette for now, but as those of you that know me know, I usually end up using it as a darkening color. That said, I will have a nice strong red and a nice strong blue on my palette, so if I need to throw a little purple in, maybe that's how I'll do it. We'll see. Before I start putting any color down, what else do I have? Let's see. All right, here is my work area. Palette, porcelain palette that can hold all the different colors that I'm going to have. In this case, a lot of the mixing will happen directly on the painting. It makes it more fresh and more alive. I have my QOR, Core Watercolor Pan Set from Golden, 12 colors. I love how saturated these colors are, how transparent they are. They are staining, so putting them down, you have to do that with a little thought, but they're really great colors. I've got my brush mat. It's an old tea towel. Always wanting to make sure you get just the right amount of paint and water on your paper sometimes means taking some material off your brush right before you put your brush on your paper. So you can see this one's been around a while. Toothbrush for splatter marks, which I'll do at some point. Here we've got the brushes I'll use. These are all rosemary brushes, and they are, I think they're called Snowdrop. They're the acrylic or acrylic bristle watercolor brushes from Rosemary and Company. Some of these are branded Yelesiev from a workshop I took with Vlad. They range in size from 4, 8, 10, 12, and 14. I'll do all rounds on this. And I start with bigger brushes and work down to the small ones, just like I start with lights and work my way to the darks. So that's about it for the prep level of the painting. I have, can you see these? I have 2 water buckets, one for clean and one for dirty. Those of you that know me know halfway through the painting, they're both dirty. Sometimes I get up and clean one out. Sometimes I don't. Off screen, my coffee cup. And then I've got some paper towel here that is handy for blotting up if you get a run. That sort of thing. Works like the tea towel as well, but this I keep right by where I'm painting so that I can dab onto the painting surface if I need to. We're going to come back in a minute and we'll get started with the first layer. In fact, before I leave you, let's get those colors on the palette. So here I'm setting up my sap green. And for right now, this does not have to be too strong. We'll come back and strengthen them later as we start to get more tone. What you want, though, is plenty of water and paint. You don't want to try and mix this stuff while your paper is drying. That's the big no-no. All right, so we've got a little sap green. I'm going to activate my cadmium yellow primrose. I like this 12 color pan set from Core very much. By the way, Core is the golden paint company, the folks that make those great acrylic paints. Same company, just a different line. These are their watercolors. All right. So I've got a little yellow. Do the same thing with my orange. Those are the 3 colors I'll need for that first wash. And again, that first wash is very light. It's just setting the tone. You'll like it because you'll be able to start seeing stuff on the paper. I know with the drawing you don't get to see too much. What other colors? I'm going to use some Pyrrole Red Medium. That'll come into play later, so we're just getting a little bit on our palette just so I know where it goes later. We're going to need Payne's Gray in our background and in our shadow areas. I've come to like Payne's Gray. I used to avoid it the same way that I avoided blacks. I think that in place of purple, sometimes it's a better darkening agent. If I don't want to throw the painting off too far, it's a nice, cool, shadowy kind of color. And then last, ooh, that well's getting a little low. I'm going to have to add some ultramarine to this, or get another pan of ultramarine. It does seem that I go through the blue, the green, and the orange fastest on this set. That said, I've had this pan for about 1.5 years, or the original pan for about 1.5 years. I just picked up a second one because I thought I had lost the first one. So there you see, you've got the colors that we'll be using in the painting. As a reference, they are always be on the screen here when you're seeing the painting. They're up here. I've got my reference photo. I've got my drawing. We're ready to get started. So the other thing is that with this first wash, if I go outside of the pear, I don't necessarily have to be that loose, but if I go outside of the pear, at least up on the top half and above the plate, the background is much darker and I can find the shape by using the background. That said, it's not my intention to do that right now. So let's start getting some color in there. And I'll start with this pear back here. Get a little yellow in there, and you can see these aren't countries. I'm not following borders as far as the colors go. Right now I am trying to work around anything that I have mapped out in my drawing as a highlight, at least for now. I'm picking up that bead so it doesn't run into the plate. And I have picked up a little orange. And I'm moving that around. This is going to dry incredibly light. It's just to get a first bit of paint down. Sometimes you need to pick up that bead. I work with tilted paper, so gravity is always going to pull it down. We get into this side. Now I've got a little green in my brush. We've gone around those highlights. Pick up the bead again, so I've dried it off on my towel. In fact, I'm gonna get in there with a paper towel and dry that a little bit. Then we're gonna come back in with some more. I'm gonna pick up even some of that orangey red color now. Just moving from color to color. This front one is dominantly on the red side, so if we have it warm to start with, that helps. That's it. Now guess what? You've got your feet off the ground and you have started to make your ascent. One of the things that you don't want to do is to start going back in and fussing now. You've hit your mark. That's all you need to achieve in that first wash. We'll worry about the background later. We're going to think about the pears. So what's going to happen is this is going to dry. I'm drying out my brush right now on my tea towel, as you can see. There we go. And I'm drying it on the tea towel. And then we go back and just pick up whatever bead might be at the bottom. I already did that there. Oh, see that? That's going to be hard to get rid of. But it's also below where my painting is going to finish, so I'm not too worried about it. I accidentally hit my palette. My palette's too close to my painting hand. I'm just going to wet this some just to make it less noticeable and blot it a little bit. The truth is, that's below the bottom of the painting, so I'm not going to think about it anymore. It's a mistake, but it's not one that we can't overcome. So in fact, I'm moving my paint out of the way and moving my coffee cup. All right, and we'll be back after this is dried. We are back, and I put some blue tape to mark off on the painting where the top and bottom is, mostly because that red spot was just jumping out at me and bothering me. This way I don't have to see it, and I know where the top of the dark goes for the background. As you can see, while we were away, I strengthened up the colors in my palette. I'm going to try and do a lot of the mixing on the paper instead of mixing them in the palette and then bringing them to the paper. Why? One of the beauties of watercolor is when these colors mingle together on the palette, it gives it that really, there we go. When these colors mingle together on the palette, it gives it that fresh, vibrant look. If you mix the color and get it homogenized on the palette and then bring it over, this would all be one color. As you start to develop layers on top of layers and adding color, all these little blends that happen on the paper add energy to the painting and give it life. So that's why I like to do that. I do have 2 open wells just in case I need to get something just right. But for the most part, one of the places where I may make a separate color is, and I'm going to do that right now on my well. this bottom well here. I'm going to take some of that yellow and I'm going to mix it with some of that red. In fact, I might even bring a little orange into it. That red is a little bit cool, so I have a warmer red to pick up and move over rather than trying to mix all of that in one move. So let's go back to the painting. If we look at our reference picture, we've got green back here, red, red. The yellow starts to warm up. It's reflected into this green. It's more yellow. And it starts to darken here. So for this bit, let's start by putting some green onto this pear. And then I'm cleaning out my brush and grabbing some yellow. And at this point, I'm painting around that pear in front of it, and I have a reason, because this is starting to develop a little bit of the depth that this painting is going to have by pushing that pear forward. While it's still wet, I can still throw more yellow into there. And looking at my reference picture, I can grab some of that warmer red that I made and let it mingle with that green. See, we're not trying to do too much. We're just trying to get some paint down, approximating the colors and approximating the darkness a little bit. This has a nice hard edge between the two. We can do the same thing with this pear in the background. Start with that warmer red I mixed up. I may have gone outside the shape a little bit, but you know what? That background can come right on top of that, and that'll be okay. So here in our second wash, we've darkened up a little bit and started to establish the roles that each of the pears play in their interconnected world. That's it. Our hands got up to the next handhold. We've grabbed on, we're steady. We can let this dry. We can look around and think about where we want to go next. But that's it for this stage. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, I'm back for a minute. I have decided that I was starting to lose the shape of my pears a little bit. At least this front one that's in the dish. So what I've done is, while that is still a little wet, come back in and added just the warm yellow tone to get these to be about the same value so that I can push this shape out more, which will happen there. Which will happen. I'm fine with the shape of this pear. This one was getting a little lost. So by equalizing these out a little bit, when I come back in and do these again, I can carve that shape out because I want this to be a little bit more bulby here than it currently is. So that's how I can do that. And the thing is that by looking at these things at every stage and taking a good hard look, you can decide if you're making a mistake, and you can still make your changes. A lot of the times when I'm teaching my classes, my students will find something they don't like and start to aggressively work on that area rather than backing away from it, finding a way to go back down that step and finding a better handhold. So for now, this is what we're going to do. We're going to let it dry, come back in, and we're going to glaze more layers. We're building up these pears a little bit at a time. It's transparent paint. You get that wonderful glow. That's the beauty of watercolor to me. Right now, we're not trying to be too fancy with details. In fact, we're not trying to do any details. We're just trying to get some color onto those basic shapes. Looking further ahead, at some point we will have to start putting in some tone in the background so that we can make sure that we get our relationships of tones right between our darks, our middles, and our lights. But we'll get there. For right now, we're working on the pears. Okay, we are back again. I have the split screen up, and I'm going to work with the split screen for a little while and see how that goes. At some point, I'll put the focus back on just the painting. But I wanted to have you be able to see the palette and see my thought process as I'm doing that. What are we going to do now? I've mixed up a stronger pile of the yellow, or at least more of it with a little more concentration. So yeah, that's stronger. And same thing with the orange. Cleaning my brush out in the dirty water bucket and then rinsing it in the clean and taking the water off it on the tea towel so that I have a brush that can pick up the color, and trying to keep my colors clean at this point. I did that because I still want to focus on rounding out this shape. And I also want to get some more tone into this one. So these are the two that we're going to work on in this stage. It's still isolated. We're trying to eat this elephant one bite at a time. I know I use that analogy a lot, but it's a good one. And I think it's important. So I'll continue to do that. So what are we going to do? I'm grabbing some yellow, and as you can see, this is a stronger tint. It's got more color in it, less water. It helps define those edges. Now, this is really the red-orange side of the pear. That's about to run away on me, so I'm going to grab it. I'm going to, in fact, blot it a little bit, and that's fine. Clean out my brush and grab more yellow. These blends, that's what I'm talking about, what I like so much to get on the paper. But I'm still trying to get that stronger edge here. And that yellow is a little bit of an opaque color. It's got a little opacity, so I can start to reclaim that shape. Still try to work around the highlights a bit. Trying not to get too far. Pick up that bead. And honestly, this highlight on the plate, it's the same as the highlights on the pear. If it runs a little bit, and it probably will, I can always come back in with that white acrylic and build it up that way. So that's fine. I really like the way that mingles, and I'm going to do the opposite on this front pear. Start with the yellow and come down and define that edge. Get some paint between those highlights. And now, again, starting to let those colors mingle right there. And I'm plumping out this pear a little bit, because looking at the photo, the shape is really a little bit more fat at the bottom. And taking care of that now. There we go. That's got a nice shape to it. And now I can grab some of that. It's really more red down here in the bottom than orange. So see, when you mix your colors right there on your paper, they have so much more life. Now what I did was I stopped short of the bottom this time so that I could control the bead. I didn't leave the bead all the way down at the bottom so that I could then play with it and pull it down myself and get it where I wanted it without running around too much. Sometimes I get over exuberant. But look at this right here. This section, the yellow into the orange, into the red. That's gorgeous, and it sings, and we don't want it to do any more than that. So the trick is to not play with it. The one thing I am going to do is come in with a damp brush, blot it on your towel. You don't want it soaking wet. You don't want to run. You don't want to cause problems. You don't want to cause a run back, but soften up this edge a little bit. These highlights have hard edges, but not super hard edges. Then pick up your paint down there. There. See, now I've started to reclaim those shapes. We are going to, again, let this dry, and we'll start to play again with the relationship of this pear closest to the light has a lot of shade, so that's dark on the bottom there. This one is probably the brightest because of its placement, but we can start to darken these guys to help push these two forward. And that's what we'll focus on, but I need to get this good and dry next. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the book over to the dryer and dry it out, and then I'll be back. Okay, we're back. I dried off the painting on with the dryer, and let's. What are our next stages going to be? We're going to work on this pear and this pear. This pear back here does have a nice bright spot that plays against the dark shadow side of there, but I need to get a little bit darker going on in the bottom half, and in this one mostly the whole thing is darker to be able to make the composition work. So while we're here, let's do a little bit of that. All right. All right. As we progress on, we're trying to be a little bit more careful with our shapes. But you can see by darkening that section, and again, mingle your colors a little bit. I added some orange to that red that had some blue in it. Dry your brush. Use it as a vacuum. hoover up that bead so that it doesn't run away on you. But now look, this one's just coming forward like gangbusters. Now, wet your brush, but take a lot of water out of it, but have it damp. So what you're doing is softening that edge so it's not so hard. There is, however, it's darker back on this side too, so I might as well do that and run that in. There we go. Look at how that mingles so nicely with that red color. Helps draw out the shape of that pear. That was exactly what I wanted to do. Now coming in with a damp brush, mostly dry, I'm just soaking up that edge a little bit so that it has a little grade to it. All right, what color do we need to think about for, tell you what, let's, switch over to here. Okay. Now, see, by using this, and I'm going to blot my paint right now so I can use the bead but not let it run away from me. I can control that shape so that we've managed to keep that pear fairly rounded, more round than it was in that first pass. And then really this guy gets darker with reds that come down and become the border for this pear, which is why everything had to be dry, because I don't want this to run into the other pear. Now I can load up with a little bit of that yellow right up here. And believe me, right now what I'm watching is my edges and that bead so that it doesn't run away from me. There. I'm gonna nice and heavy with that yellow now. I'm gonna bring it in because I want to still have a little bit of light there on that side. Now pull it out of the brush so that you can do this. Your color is mingling right there on the paper. And still nice and dark. I'm going to hit into this area that's wet because that's all in shadow there. So I should build up that just a little bit now. Okay. We are rocking and rolling. This needs to dry, but I want to tell you where we're going next. Where we are going next is before I start playing more with the values of the pears, I need to see where it's going to sit on the page a little bit. And I'm going to do that by putting in the first bit of this shadow on this pear, the shadow on the plate, the shadow from this pear that falls on the plate, and I'll start putting in the background. Again, we're going to build up layer by layer, but I need to start claiming some of that space. And I think we'll do it by, once this is dry, I'll flip it over and put the first wash of that background down in it and let that dry, and put in a light cast of those shadows from the pears, and that'll be our stopping point for now. But we're building stage by stage. We're getting further and further without having that uncorrectable mistake. And every time we stop, we're looking around and thinking about what we want to do next. That is, in my opinion, that is how you make a successful watercolor. Yeah. That said, I could be completely wrong, or at least there are other ways to do this, but this is how I do it. This is how my style has developed over the years. I hope you can see it in the video, because I can really see the depth starting to happen. So now I really want to form the world that they're sitting in. Really happy with how we're going so far. So check back in. Okay, I'll be back. You're back. I dried the pears, and I have flipped the page upside down, which you'll see in a second. Here we go. I'm going to start my background as a graded wash, so starting light, running with some water behind the pears above the plate. If we look at the original painting, which, by the way, at this point, I think the pears in this demo have a little bit more life than the ones in the painting you're seeing right now. Closer to the photo. However, I know as I go further in and start to do darker washes in those shadow areas, some of that saturation will go away. But looking back at where we are now, somewhere around here, I'll start with some water. That's why this had to be completely dry. If you're not patient enough to let this dry by air, get one of those heat guns and dry off between each section. You'll be amazed at how much frustration that saves you. So I'm moving up to my number 14 brush, 14 round, getting it nice and wet in the clean water. And I'm going to come right up to the pear. There's still a little bit of warmth in this brush from some yellow. That's okay. It actually doesn't hurt at all. And I'm laying a bead of water across, right up to the pears. Because when I start to come in now with some color, that will work its way up, just like you see here. And now I'm just doing a graded wash. Go right up to your pears, get that shape while you have a chance with this darkness. Don't worry about your stems, they come in later. And now this wash is some Payne's gray and some ultramarine blue. And I'm keeping that edge nice and wet. You don't want it to dry out on you. Don't think about the stems. Don't think about anything except going around those pears. Picking up some color. It's going to be darkest right behind the pears. However, don't worry too much about that now because we're going to come back and do this several times. This is just a first wash to start to develop the background and help to get you to see the different values in the rest of the painting. It's a good idea at this point to also mix up that color in the background a little. Add some of that red to your blue color. So you've got a little bit of a shift from a greeny color to a blue color with some red. Don't let that bead sit too long on the tape. So just grab it and finish it off. And it's got a nice feathery quality to it. You're not trying to do too much at this point. Like I said, all we're starting to do is build a world that those pears live in. If I were a less experienced painter right now, this white spot going back behind the pear would bother me. But I know enough that I'm going to be doing more layers and darkening that this is just helping me be able to compare my lights to my darks. The painting is already starting to have some real life in it. I'm really happy with where it is and where it's going. I added a little bit more ultramarine blue to my palette because it was a little thinned out. And for the first pass on this shadow, ultramarine is fine. It doesn't have, it's transparent colors, so it doesn't have to be the exact color right now. All we're starting to do is start to build up some of that dimension. You want that edge away to be softer. I'm just going to hit this with some paper towel. There. Again, this will dry light. This is just to get that first shadow in there. Same thing here. We're going to cast that cast shadow from behind this pear. Just getting a little value in there to help build the world that we're living in. And again, behind the plate and underneath on this side. And one of the tricks is that the shadows start to get lighter as they fade away. So just add some water to that wash. And with another brush and just hoover that edge a little bit. You just want to make that brush nice and thirsty and pull it off a little bit. There is a fine line here that's a shadow. And then there's a little bit of a reflected light in there, so that's why you see that little pop there. There we go. And now you can take that same brush, get most of the tone out of it, and just wet up in here. Then you just want that area below the highlight to have a little tone. So, you know, that's starting to say plate without having to do too much work with it. We now have a resting place. We know that our shadows will be darker and darker, and we're going to build up the layers even more on our pears. I think this is a really good spot to stop for now. I'm gonna I may have had the picture on the palette. I'm sorry. So let's review. I painted in the background, started with water. This was upside down. Started with water, so I got a soft edge. And then it was a light mix of Payne's gray and scraps from whatever was on the palette. It's just to set some tone in the background to push those pears forward. Then using a lightened up wash of ultramarine blue, I started to put the shadows in on the plate and behind the pears. I think this is as far as we need to go for today. This will be part 1 of the video, and we will do part 2 tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and tomorrow we'll finish these up, continue to darken layer by layer, and then add those final details in that really start to make it become three-dimensional. So hang in there, and we'll finish this up tomorrow.